Greetings, Guardians, my name is Bife here. So, the Heresy reveal stream has just finished. I have a few notes in front of me. This is an off-script video, but I wanted to talk about some of the narrative things that we saw within this reveal stream. And yeah, there's some interesting stuff in here, particularly when it pertains to the Hive generally. But also, of course, we have more revealed details on what we'll actually be doing this season, the major characters involved, and the ever so persistent question of will the Dreadnought see the return of Oryx? And little spoiler alert for all of you, in some sense, yes, he will return. But first, let's talk about that time of year again. Hear me out. This January, no New Year's resolutions. Strange, right? But there's a reason why. I'm sure that yonks ago you've all read some article just like I did that stated that most New Year's resolutions will fail. And why do they fail? Well, because they're too hard or they're too complicated. So instead of pursuing your dreams of becoming the next Gordon Ramsay, maybe instead start smaller by looking at the food in your own kitchen and what you eat. Which means you can start smaller and simpler with Factor. With Factor, you can get chef-prepared meals on the table in 2 minutes. More importantly, they taste great and you have a ton of dietary options if you need them. On a weekly basis, you can choose from over 35 meal options including keto, high-protein, vegan, and veggie options. And I mean, if you're just looking to make life a little bit more exciting with a little bit less hassle, you can do that too. For me though, the biggest thing that they actually save on is time. I have a ton of work to do on the regular, which means anything I can simplify in my life is something I want to simplify. In fact, it does that for my mealtime. It means I can actually spend time on the goals that I want to achieve, and then I'll be able to attain those. So, make your life a little bit easier and a little bit simpler. Go ahead and sign up for Factor using my link down below if you want a discount. Get 50% off and free shipping on your first Factor box by using my link in the description. Thanks again to Factor for sponsoring this video. Anyway, back to the lore. So, let's talk about the bits and pieces that we learned from this reveal stream. If I didn't make it clear already with the little spoiler warning before probably the biggest spoiler of the entire stream, yeah, spoilers throughout, so leave if you're not interested in any of this being spoiled for you. Why are you on YouTube at this point? You know the routine, we've been doing this for a decade, get out of here. Anyway, so first, detail first. We of course saw that at the very end of Final Shape, 3 echoes were released from the Traveler. The first one ended up with Maya Sundaresh, the second one ended up with Fikrul, which is now in the hands of Aramis, and the final, 3rd echo, slammed into the Dreadnought apparently, and was pursued by one of the Dread. The really interesting thing about all of that is that may well be the emphasis and the reason for changes within the Dreadnought. And if that is what's happening here, maybe that explains what's going on, because the other big detail which we saw within one of the major reveals of art for the entirety of Heresy is that in some shape or form, Oryx's spirit has risen again. The way they described it in the stream was that his spirit had been, quote, dredged from the bones of the Dreadnought. We of course also encountered Oryx's body way back when in Ghosts of the Deep. We saw it at the very bottom of the seafloor on Titan. However, spirit and body are two different things, and I think that there's a very interesting possibility here that I just want to go ahead and bring up, which is simply this. You remember way back in the Books of Sorrow? Maybe you don't remember this if you're not a lore nerd, but there is a point at which Oryx killed his 2 siblings, Xivu Arath and Savathûn, in order to take their power. He then resurrected them with the power of the embodiment of Cunning, which resurrected Savathûn, and by embodying War, which resurrected Xivu Arath. So what's dredged up Oryx's spirit? Don't know, but if we're supposed to be the ones taking on the role of the Navigator, and if we're going on and trying to face off against these various Taken, Hive, and Dread that are being led by a Subjugator, maybe it's the case that we are seeing them attempting to resurrect Oryx properly, and they've partially succeeded. Hence the name of the episode, Heresy, because they're using the Echo to do this, and not just the embodiment of navigation as would be done in some other fashion. That's just a guess, that's just me talking off the cuff with this, But who knows? At this exact moment in time, the reason why it's called heresy isn't perfectly explained, but there are definitely signs towards it. So, we'll see what's going on. The other thing that I think is important to see from the reveal art, well, there's two things actually. First of all, you can see what is probably the major antagonist of the episode, which is our subjugator over on the right-hand side of this art. Of course, you can also see the Echo, which is prominently slammed into what I believe was the old Dreadnought's weapon, as well as the area where you reached the Altar of Oryx. So, if we're going to return to that old epicenter of power, that wouldn't surprise me. Maybe that isn't the Echo, maybe it's just a remnant of everything, I'm not sure. The other really important detail to mention, though, is just... I mean, the Dreadnought is kind of alive and kind of not. It's very much still as dead as Oryx was, but also there are bits and pieces to it that have returned. The old armor of the Dreadnought is peeling away to reveal bone and chitin and flesh underneath. And also, it's covered in tentacles. Like, really big tentacles. Like, these things are the size of tomb ships. They are massive and they are sprawling throughout the entire system and structure. And I'm going to be completely honest, I don't know what the hell these things are. I don't think I understand where these would have come from. Now, is it possible that this is related to the Dreadnought being forged partially from the baleful armor and hide of Akka? Well, maybe, I don't know. Perhaps the resurrective effect that has brought Oryx back is also starting to affect the Dreadnought generally. So we have a worm god that's kind of being resurrected in all this? I don't know. We'll have to see about all of that, but it's so prominently featured throughout all of the art and throughout all of the new delve into the nether kind of activity that it's kind of impossible to not notice it. Speaking of which, there's more on that narrative, but I think it comes back a little bit later. Controlling the power of the Taken is going to be a really big theme on this, which of course was knowledge that Oryx actually learned from Akka, the Worm of Secrets, the same worm god who now armors his Dreadnought, or whose remains were used to armor it. And Oryx recorded those secrets on what are known as the Tablets of Ruin, these ancient hive artifacts which he then used in order to, quote, go into the deep. As best we can tell, this was used in order to make contact with a primordial entity from way beyond what we have seen thus far in the game. I'm pretty certain, based on the way that language is used within each of the lore tabs and with the way that the original Books of Sorrow was written, that this is not Oryx using the Tablets of Ruin to contact the Witness, but instead is using the Tablets of Ruin to travel into the deep, into a dimension of darkness, where he was contacted by something else. The likely guess is that this was the Winnower, and it just so happens that one of the Tablets of Ruin is an artifact this season. The seasonal artifact, you know, where you get all your perks. So yeah, that's concerning and alarming, and it maybe hints at what the rest of the entire episode is all about, because it turns out that we may well be using the artifacts in a manner that Oryx used them, to control the power of the Taken. In fact, that is the stated goal of some of our allies and what they'll be leading us along. Speaking of which, Eris Morn, the Drifter, and Deputy Commander Sloane will all have a role in this story. Eris and Drifter are fairly self-explanatory, but Sloane's role, for those of you who weren't around during the Season of the Deep, is not well known. Sloane stayed behind on Titan way back in the Season of Arrivals, and she returned in the Season of the Deep. She was corrupted by Taken infestation from Xivu Arath, and in the process of all of that, it meant that she was able to tap into the Taken's communications and those who were giving them greater orders. Her resolve is something that needs to be stated with all of this, because essentially she kept the Hive God of War at bay for years, just on her own with no one but her ghost and Asa, the great Leviathan of Titan. And ultimately, that means that she has unbelievable mental fortitude and she has been able to resist being taken. That is something pretty unique across, well, a lot of the universe. I think the only other person who has been able, in a catalogued and proper sense, to actually resist the pull of being taken, where it just dissolves your entire personality and turns you into a husk, where you only obey the will of the one who took you, yeah, the only other person is Mara Sov. So you're looking at some pretty powerful resolve here. Sloane is apparently going to be teaching us the ways of resolve, and is going to be teaching us to manifest the power of the Taken and Old Hive magics, which we will then be able to weave into our paracausal abilities, be they light or darkness. This is something we will be using in order to fight against our new enemies within this episode. So, we have a pretty alarming set of circumstances, and I think it is worth really briefly touching on that point, because if the entire point of the dread here is in order to recover the Tablets of Ruin, find the way of speaking into the deep and to that darkness, there is a reason for all of that. If they are trying to get back to it, I think it's because what the Witness originally saw within the Veil informed it on creating the final shape, and gave it the inspiration for its entire goal. The Dread were manifestations of the Witness's will, but also they were twisted individuals who were created in order to serve it. And with the Witness being dead, they've been searching and seeking these echoes for a long time. It's probably the case that, having discovered that one of them slammed into the Dreadnought, they may also be looking for that secret of how to take, and that matters a whole lot, purely on the basis that if they can contact what the Witness contacted, when it originally created itself and looked into the Veil, they may well be able to greet themselves alongside a power that is far greater than anything we've ever seen. I think if there are big story implications going forward, at least I would hope that is part of the direction where things are being taken, because the Winnower storyline and plotline is really not something that's being talked about a whole lot within Destiny outside of a few lore tabs, and it is realistically the future of the entire franchise. If this Dread has taken control of the Echo and is looking to use it and the old knowledge of how to take in order to build up some kind of greater force so that it can project power and become essentially the new stand-in for the Witness, then we need to worry, because it's standing in for the Witness as the arm of a power that is even greater. So yeah, that's our hope for the future narrative. All that being said, this is an episode. I don't know exactly how all of this is going to go. One thing I have seen from the reveal stream is that apparently they're looking to recodify the way that they do stories. They have new tech for when displaying holoprojector conversations. They're also refocusing on the way that we interact with the story and narrative. There will occasionally still be moments where we return to a vendor somewhere on the Dreadnought, but, well, actually I don't know if it's somewhere on the Dreadnought, that's not been confirmed yet, but there are attempts now to try and make it so that the narrative of the game is going to be told in a different manner, and so that it's not just a whole long series of radio conversations and text dialogue pop-ups. Again, they've taken a few stabs at this. We'll see if this is any better. Hopefully it is. I don't know what's going on with it, so we'll have to wait and see. Either way, look for more Heresy details on the channel in the coming weeks. There will definitely be more stuff coming along with all of that when it actually releases, which is this time next week practically, or, well, Tuesday reset, you know the time if you're a Destiny player. Also, keep in mind, there were new Sundered Doctrine details, and really quickly I want to go over that because there isn't much, but there is enough to give us at least a little extra hint at things. If you take a look at the Sundered Doctrine portion where they talk about the raid race, or rather the dungeon race for this, you will see that they show the actual pin that you get for the title, and the pin itself displays a worm prominently on it, a worm larva in particular, not a massive worm god, and it looks like it's at the center of the Upended. That's just a guess, but the worm larva is definite, and that means that worms are probably going to be at the core of all this, either as part of the narrative focus, or as a mechanic that are being used. That's the way I interpret this, at least. As for the Upended being at the center of this, if that's what the worm is really backed behind, then yeah, that makes a certain degree of sense as well. It is possibly one of the most powerful artifacts that you've found within the entirety of the pyramid, so it makes sense that someone would be returning to this place in order to try and claim it. What this has to do with the worms, I don't know, but Rhulk was also well known for experimenting with the worms. You know the Caretaker? Yeah, that's the fruit of all his labor. It's the combination of a Scorn with hive worm power, and ultimately it was able to feed its worm and build and grow its power to a substantial extent. We did destroy it as well, but it's not impossible that other experiments, like the many of those that have been calcified in ice or glass or whatever it may be, that are just strewn about the deck of the pyramid, yeah, maybe those are something that needs to be taken care of, because there's a lot of them. There are an awful large amount of them. In the room where you enter, you can see dozens, if not hundreds of worms that are just left in cold storage. So, yeah, we'll figure that out as time goes on. And of course, as I've mentioned earlier, where worms are involved, there is also the corpse of the worm mother Zeta at the center of all this. Who knows if she is actually going to be involved in this? Who knows if she's the boss? Maybe she's relevant to the narrative, but either way, I think that's relatively important. If you want to see me discuss more of this, by the way, you can go ahead and check out Dungeon Zone's pre-show. Remember that if you are tuning in for the Dungeon Race, it's going to be something you can see over on Evan and CB Gray's stream. That's something you can catch on Twitch, and it'll be displaying throughout the entirety of the day. Bungie will be pushing it. I will be there in the pre-show as well to give a brief little talk about lore and answer some questions, and to see what might be happening. I may be on later in the stream. We've not discussed anything about that, but that's purely on the basis of if there is something utterly massive, maybe they call on me. Who knows? Either way, I'm going to be on call for that, and I'll be looking forward to doing Sundered Doctrine myself at some point and bringing you all a big, deep lore breakdown, just like I did for Vesper's Host. Anyway, that's all from me for today. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, and if you're looking forward to doing anything in Heresy, go ahead and leave a like, and also remember to go ahead and leave your own thoughts down below in the comments section. And if you want more content from worlds near and far, go ahead and hit subscribe and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications. But as per usual, know that your viewership, as always, is quite enough for me. And that in the meantime, my name is Bife. Rodacia Arastra. I'll see you, Starside.